Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, A Single Source of Truth, Driving Progress with Data in 2020. My name is Ty, and I will be your moderator for today's 60-minute event. This event is being presented by HR Morning and is being sponsored by Looker. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the chat box in the control panel. If they're regarding the subject being presented, I'll add them to the queue for questions at the end. Please remember that it is a violation of our copyright to record the conference. Now I'd like to introduce your speaker, Daniel Mintz.
Thanks so much, Ty, and thanks everybody. I'm looking forward to talking about this critical issue. I guess it's probably not surprising that I think it's important, but the topic at hand is, is 2020, which is almost upon us, the year to finally monetize your data stack? And I think the answer to that question is really dependent on, will that provide real value to your business? Monetizing tech is fun for engineering types, but really the bottom line is it going to provide more value to your business? And so that's really what we're going to talk about. As Ty said, I'm the chief data evangelist at a company called Looker, and I talk to a lot of customers, a lot of people about what's going on in the world of data. It's a big part of my job, and I think the world of data is changing. Maybe we could past tense that. Maybe we could say it's already changed. And I'm going to talk about three big trends that I hear about constantly from the people who I talk to, because I think they really drive us towards an answer to the question that's at the heart of this conference. So the first is just that there are more applications inside your average enterprise than ever before. They are just exploding. I don't think that's going to stop anytime soon. IT has given up the keys that decide, what applications come into your company, and now everybody is buying them, and that has some real implications on the data side. The second trend is that there's just more demand for data than ever before. So, if that first trend is really about supply, this trend is really about demand. Everybody wants access to data. Everybody wants, a piece of that data, because they think it can help them do their job better. And then the third is a technology piece, which is just the infrastructure that's available to us. The tools that are available to us have really changed pretty dramatically. And so I'll talk about how that interacts with those first two trends. So let's dive in on the first trend now, which is just that, those business applications are exploding. And, you can think about this, or you can sort of realize this very easily by just thinking about how many SaaS applications you've used today already. I have used my calendaring app. I have used email, obviously. I've used Slack. I've used Expensify to submit an expense report. I am using GoToWebinar right now. So, I suspect you're no different. I suspect you're constantly using SaaS applications or cloud applications. And, the thing to know about all of those applications is that they're all putting off data. They are all putting off data exhaust is sometimes how I refer to it, because fundamentally they are all data applications. Whether you're a marketer who's working in Google ads or Facebook ads, you're fundamentally sitting in front of a computer and putting in data. You're looking at which campaigns are doing well. You're changing bids or pausing campaigns. If you're a salesperson, who works mostly in Salesforce, updating your forecasts, putting in the latest information about the deals you have in flight, you're sitting in front of a computer and putting in data. If you're, a support person using Zendesk, fundamentally you're sitting there putting in data, tagging, tickets, and capturing data about, what your customers are having trouble with. And so, if we look at it that way, we realize that the question isn't really, will we put data into these applications? Because the answer to that is clearly yes. The question is, will we be able to ask questions and get answers back from that data, or will the data remain locked away in these applications? I sometimes talk about my wife, who is a Pilates instructor, so not your average data worker, not someone who people would necessarily think of as a data worker. but she is a Pilates instructor, and all of the time that she spends working when she is not actually teaching is spent in an app, arranging her schedule, moving her clients around, opening up an extra spot in this class, scheduling a new class. So she too is even putting data into that application, and she has told me many times that she wishes she could sort of ask questions of that data, know which classes fill up fastest, whether she should add a new beginner class or an expert class, but she can't access that data. So even though she's sitting and putting all that data into the application, getting it back out, getting answers back out is very, very difficult. And what often happens is that, somebody wants access to the data that lives locked away in those applications. And so they get some tools, they get a workbook tool, Excel or Tableau, and they extract the data, they export the data, and they start stitching it together and making a little bit of sense of it. And that seems good because now they actually do have some answers to their questions. So it's a start. But very quickly, what looks like this initially becomes this. And so now, rather than having, a reasonably manageable little amount of data flowing to one person, you actually have all of these silos where everybody is going all the way down to these different applications. Each of them uses different sets of applications. They're exporting that data. They're trying to stitch it together using a workbook. It's very manual. It's very painful. And they all have different answers to the same question because they're getting data from different places at different times and then interpreting it differently. And so you just get chaos because there's simply no way to manage this mess. And what that leads to is isolation, where every time that you deploy data, it's slightly different and you can't reuse what you've done. And so that's very difficult to manage. It's difficult to keep a handle on all of those silos. It makes sharing really hard because everyone's got their silo and their data doesn't necessarily make sense or jive with the data that other people are using. And so if you try to stitch those two pieces of data together, they often don't go together, they don't match. It breaks a lot. That's sort of the sad truth, is that it's brittle, and so it falls over a lot. It doesn't scale well. And what happens is that the decision making at your company ends up being constrained by who owns which data in which silo. And that just doesn't make any sense. Like that isn't how we should be making decisions in business, right? We shouldn't be driven by which data is available to us. We should be using the data to drive our decision making. And instead we're getting the reverse. And so, that's really what's happening on the supply side. So now let's talk about the demand side, right? Which is that everybody wants access to data. And part of that is driven by our personal lives. We've come to expect access to data, the ability to ask questions of data when we shop, being able to compare, shipping speeds for different items. When we pull out those little computers in our pockets, we get data. When we have to take a trip, we can compare how long it'll take to get there, depending on which method we take and how long, how much that'll cost. Even when we are at home in the evening relaxing, we expect data to guide our way, right? You watch this, and this. I think you would also enjoy this. Well, that's data driving us, right? And so in our personal lives, we've come to expect access to this data, this ability to ask questions of data. And so not surprisingly, when we go to the workplace, we have those same expectations. And so there are all of these new roles that are fundamentally data jobs. And they may not think of themselves that way. You may not think of them that way, but fundamentally that's what they are, right? If you're a marketer today, a lot of your job is about analyzing data to try to understand which campaigns are working, which aren't, which are worth, increasing your spend on, which you should shut down. If you're a DevOps engineer managing cloud resources, your whole job is data. How else could you know how well, your servers are performing? Whether you're spending the right amount of money, whether you need to upsize, or whether you can shut down some instances that you're no longer using without data, right? If you're, a customer success manager, what do you want to see? You want to understand which of your customers are likeliest to churn so that you can decide where to put your limited time, reach out to the customer, see if you can get them more value from your product so that they don't churn. So all of these people recognize that they can do their jobs better if they have access to the right data. And the companies that figure out how to use data effectively benefit. They are more likely to grow revenue. They build competitive advantage, right? They really see the benefits of using that data effectively. And when we look at companies like Deliveroo, which does restaurant meal delivery in all across Europe, and they've grown extremely fast, they're data driven, right? They thrive because everybody in the business, as part of their onboarding, figures out how to access data, how to ask questions of data, right? So that anywhere they are, they can ask questions of data. And what that means is that the questions are answered more quickly. It means that the decisions are made more quickly and better. It means that people aren't waiting in line for access to data. And it also means that the data team, rather than having an endless queue of requests to go through, can really focus on the higher value tasks, right? Figuring out how they can support business growth, what is the new strategic initiative that really has the best chance of delivering, because they're not stuck just answering questions because everybody is actually accessing that data directly and serving it to themselves. And as a data person, it's a little bit hard for me to admit this, but I think it's necessary. We're just not going to reach everybody with the existing business intelligence tools that we have at our disposal, right? If all we can offer is a dashboard or a report, what we're going to see is that people stay with what they're familiar. And that's going to be Excel most of the time, right? For most people, that's what they're familiar with. That's what they're comfortable with. And so that's where they're going to stay unless we can offer them something better. And if all we can offer them is something that seems intimidating and confusing, that's not better from their perspective. And so they're not going to leave what they're comfortable with. But there is hope. And the hope largely is driven by the third trend, which is that the data infrastructure that's available to us has really evolved enormously over the last 10 or 15 years. I think the buzzword before AI and machine learning were the buzzwords. Big data was the buzzword. Big data was going to change everything. And, I will admit, I don't think big data did change everything. But one thing that I think it absolutely did deliver was incredibly fast, powerful databases, data warehouses, data engines, things that just had not existed before. And so that starts to remove some of the key constraints that made what we were trying to do so hard, right? So because databases today are bigger and faster and cheaper than they've ever been before, they can process more data more efficiently and more cheaply. That means that we actually can start to connect all of that new supply with all of that new demand. It also means, because those databases are more flexible, that we can simplify the process of ETL. And for those who aren't familiar, ETL stands for extract, transform, and load, and it's basically just the process of getting the data out of the source, out of Salesforce or Zendesk or FreshBooks or wherever, and getting it into a database where you can start to analyze it. And historically, ETL has been very complicated because the databases needed that data to just be in just the right shape before it came in. Otherwise, they couldn't work with it. But more flexible databases today have allowed us to start to swap that pattern, so that rather than doing ETL, where we have to do that transformation, that manicuring, that hygiene before it gets loaded, we can start to do it after. So we can just do a real simple extract the data from its source, load it into a database, and start to transform it at that point, which is much easier and can be iterative. And for those of us who've made a living writing SQL, structured query language, the language the databases speak, databases still speak that. So we can use our existing skills to navigate this new world. And if you have questions about whether cloud databases are really, if enterprises are really going to move their data to the cloud, I'm here to tell you, yes, they are. The cloud has won. It gives us massive scale that just was unimaginable if we were buying and maintaining our own servers. Gives us, I've talked about this, but it gives us power. It gives us amazing performance. Gives us elasticity, so we can scale up the amount of power we have, in a second as we need it, and then scale it back down and stop paying for it when we no longer need it. They're much easier to use than old school databases. they cost less, and it actually gives us more security, because now it's not just our security team that's watching out for us, but it's our security team plus 1,000 security engineers at Google or Amazon or Microsoft. So there are just a ton of advantages here, and that's why people are moving to the cloud so fast. And so that then raises the question, so if we've got more supply of data, we've got more people demanding data, and we've got better tools than we've ever had before, it raises the question, well, what is the future of business intelligence? And I think we can see what the guiding principles are from those trends, right? We know that data exhaust has grown and will only keep growing. And so whatever we're going to build has to evolve to encompass these new sources and know that we will be able to keep up with them because there will only be more tomorrow. We know that we need to be able to deliver actionable insight for everyone when they need it, where they need it. We need to come to them rather than trying to make them come to us. And we know that we need to take full advantage of the modern data warehouses that are available to us, because that's where we're going to get the technological edge that we need in order to deliver on those first two pieces. And so what we really want to do is we want to go from this mess to something that looks more like this. And that is really what Looker is built for, right? Is this new world where we can leverage the amazing data warehouses, databases, data engines that are available to us to keep delivering data to everybody, but to do so in a unified way where everyone is seeing the same picture of the data rather than having to make it up on their own. And I think just to give a little bit of a sketch of what that looks like, today's data warehouses, as I said, it's easier than ever to load data in. And once you've got that data in, that's where Looker comes in. It gives you a platform that sits on top of your database, gives you unified metrics. It takes all of the knowledge that your analysts have about what your data means, and it gets it out of their head where nobody else can access it, and into the data platform where everybody can access it and where you can get scale as you add more people. It manages permissions to make sure people are only accessing the data they're supposed to, gives you version control so that you can see what the definition of a metric is and what it used to be, when it changed, why it changed, who changed it, gives you that security that's so important, and it's all built for today's clouds. And from there, it's not just about delivering business intelligence, although that is certainly one of the tools in our toolbox, right? We still want to be able to deliver great dashboards, great reports, but we want to be able to go a lot further than that. And so the data platform from Looker really gives you that, where you can also deliver data directly into people's existing workflows, whether that's using Twilio to deliver to their phone, or Marketo or HubSpot to drive marketing campaigns, or directly into Slack or email. And you can do that based on a schedule so that people have their sales report on Monday morning at 9 a.m., or you can do it based on alerting thresholds and say, if this changes by more than this, I want to know about it. And you can also build custom experiences on top of the platform, leveraging that knowledge about what the data means to deliver that data to internal stakeholders in the workflows and applications they are using, or to deliver it to external folks, to your suppliers, your partners, your customers. And a lot of customers of ours find that they can actually monetize that and create new revenue streams by delivering that data to their external stakeholders. And the way that Looker does that, the sort of key differences here are, there's sort of three of them. The first is what we call our modeling layer. Some people might call it a semantic layer. Some people might call it LookML, which is the sort of name of the language. Some people might call it that thing that I don't ever have to see because my analyst took care of it. But the thing it delivers is a single source of truth, right? It takes all of your metrics, all of your business metrics, and it puts them in one place where there aren't 16 different definitions of gross revenue, because it's defined in one place, and anytime that anyone wants access to that business metric, they go to one place and they get that same definition. They don't have to know what that definition is, the sort of precise meaning of that definition. They just know the business term that they're comfortable with, and they can access that. The second is that it leaves your data in the database, and that goes back to that third trend of more powerful databases, right? In the past, this was impossible. This was the key constraint. You had to get your data out of the database, because if you let your users touch the database, they would kill it. That's not true anymore. So by leaving your data in the database that you've invested in, Looker helps you get value from that database and from that investment, and it makes sure that the data is always fresh, that users have access to the full data set, that they can, look at a summary of, yearly sales all the way down to individual transactions, all in a snap. And then the third is that it's built, as modern software. Looker's been around for 7 or 8 years now, and it's built on an extensible web architecture. It's got full RESTful APIs, so anything you can do via the interface, you can also do programmatically via an API. Sharing is as easy as sharing a URL, and it can plug into the full ecosystem that you've already built of all those applications. And Looker, this is working. It's trusted by all of these industry leaders because they see the value in getting data in the hands of all of these people who demand access in a way that doesn't, take up all of their analytics team's resources, and make sure that everybody stays on the same page. And so, I think the future of BI, the thing that you need to think about investing in 2020, is not only a BI tool, but it's a data platform, right? Something that can deliver a lot more value than just dashboards and reports, and does that by making sure that you're using a unified, trusted view of your data, where people don't have to worry, is this definition right? Is this data right? Because there's no faster way to undermine people's usage of data than by giving them trust issues. So you want to make sure that your business users always know that the data they're looking at is right and trustworthy. It uses an architecture that's built to take full advantage of today's most innovative technology, but also is built to easily shift and take advantage of the technology that's not even been invented yet, right? Whatever tomorrow comes up with, we want you to be able to get full value from that as well. And finally, a data platform isn't just about making people come to get dashboards and reports, but it's about putting actionable insights in their hands whenever and wherever they are, and whenever and wherever they need them. Because fundamentally, if people are going to be making better decisions with data, they need to have those actionable insights in their hands. If you say, sure, you can get that, you just have to log into this new tool and learn how to use it, and then check in whenever you need it, and it'll take a few hours, they're not going to do it. Whereas if that data comes and finds them in Slack or Microsoft Teams, or if it texts them on their phone, that's a very different thing. That's going to get them the answer that they need very quickly, so that they can make the decision that they need to, and they can make it better. So that's my presentation. I tried to keep it pretty tight. I'd rather answer any questions that you all have rather than just talk at you. So hopefully that was informative. And as Ty said at the beginning, if you have any questions, please make sure to put them into the question and answer box. And I'll give you all a second to do that.
Thank you, Daniel. I would like to take your questions, as he had mentioned. And while we wait for any to come in via chat, our first question did come in through email. Actually, a couple of them, but here's the first one. All this technology is awesome, but what's the best way to ensure that it's actually used?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the answer there is that technology alone never fixes problems. Solutions come from a mix of technology and people. And so really you need to think about what are the problems that you're trying to solve. And I think in most cases that's about getting answers to the questions that people have in a way that makes sense to them at the time that they need them. And so if that's the problem that we're trying to solve, I think technology absolutely is part of that solution, but actually working with the individuals and the teams that are trying to get more value from their data and say, explain to me what the workflow is. Where are you getting stuck? Why are you not able to access the data that you need right now? And helping them think through that and what their process should look like, so that you can sort of do the change management to work with them and make sure that they really are you have delivered the thing that they need, right? It's easy to sort of build a dashboard and hand it off to them and say, oh, here's the thing that you need. This is what you told me you needed, and so here it is. Gotta go. Bye. I think more often than not, we miss on our first try. And so you've handed them this thing, they think that's all that's available. And so that's the end of the interaction. Really what you want to do is you want to show it to them and say, hey, how is this? And hopefully they'll dive in and they'll say, well, this part's good and this part isn't quite what I meant, and I don't really understand this part. And from doing that iterative process of then correcting those mistakes and working with them to really make sure you delivered the thing that they actually need, that's the way that we learn, how to actually get value, right? How to deliver value to our customers, whether they're internal or external customers. So I think that process is as critical to success in sort of changing habits as the technology. So it's a great question.
Thank you, Daniel. Next question. When new data becomes available, how easy is it to incorporate into Looker?
Yeah, it's a great question. So because Looker is sitting directly on top of your database, as soon as that data is available in your database, Looker has access to it, right? So that slow process that most tools have, where it's like, well, the data has to be loaded, and then it has to be extracted and then downloaded. That's gone, right? You don't have that slow iterative pattern, because now the data, as soon as it's available in the database, is available to Looker. And so that really changes what people can do. We see very commonly that companies are using Looker in an operational context where the data has to be instant, right? It has to be, oh, I'm watching the inventory in our warehouse right now, and as soon as something is low on inventory, I need to place a reorder, and I need to take it off our website so we don't sell something that we don't have. And so that it's not useful for that data to be, a day old or even an hour old. It has to be up to the minute. So we see those operational use cases all the time, because there's not that additional latency that's involved by having to extract the data from the data source. You're sitting directly on top of
it. Thank you. And our next question, I'm actually going to reorder these. Does Looker store any data?
Yeah, it's a great question. So unlike really every other BI tool on the market, Looker only sends the request to your database for the specific question that you're asking, and brings back just the data that you need in order to answer that. Now, Looker does have a caching layer, and it will cache data, because, for example, if I load a dashboard and send it off to Ty, and the data in the database hasn't changed since I loaded it, there's no reason for Ty to have to go back to the database to get that data. That cache is kept by Looker and is kept encrypted, but we do want to sort of reduce the pressure on the database by keeping that cache, and that's sort of fully configurable by customers on how big they want that to be and how much they want to be using it, or if they want to turn it off entirely. But beyond that, Looker doesn't store your data, because what we recognize is, more and more companies today are making an investment in really amazing database technology, and it doesn't make a lot of sense to invest in this new amazing technology and then put something on top of that technology that sucks the data out into their own proprietary, in-memory data engine. We want to take full advantage of what those databases can do, and so that's why we let the database and all of its horsepower do the work.
Thank you, Daniel. Next question. Have you had any experience using Looker over another BI tool like Springbook, Deerwalk, or Artemis?
I can't say that I am familiar with any of those tools, so I will not pretend to be familiar. What I will say is that we do often see Looker used in conjunction with other tools. Sometimes those are data federation or data virtualization tools like Dremio or data virtuality. Sometimes it's something like Presto, where it's got access to a lot of different data sources. Sometimes it's a visualization tool that's actually sitting on top of Looker, where they're leveraging Looker's modeling layer that makes sense of the data, and then they're doing the visualization because there's some custom visualization that the customer needs. So we definitely see Looker as part of a broader ecosystem, where to get full value from that ecosystem, you need to be open and easy to use with whatever best of breed tool people are bringing to the table. So that's very much part of our philosophy. I'm sorry, I can't speak specifically to those tools that the questioner mentioned, because I'm not familiar with them.
Yeah, and just to follow up, maybe you guys could offline this, once you have more info. They had stated that the examples that I had mentioned were medical claims analysis systems.
Interesting. Yeah, we'll have to do a little bit of analysis. I suspect there are definitely, we work with a fair number of healthcare companies and insurance companies in particular. And so it would not at all surprise me if some of our professional services folks and customer success folks who work with those particular customers are familiar with those systems. I'm just not.
Cool. And this next question it's a couple questions in one. So how long is the implementation, connecting a database with Looker, and then building a first dashboard?
Great question. So we care very much about getting people to value quickly. We actually offer a free 3-week trial where we will work with your customers, with your technical folks to help them get up and running very quickly and be able to provide value to your company by the end of that 3-week trial. That's our goal. We figure that's a clear way to show how easy implementation is. So that's a thing that we do all the time. And in terms of how it actually works, when we connect to, or when you connect Looker to a database, Looker actually reads the metadata of that database and makes a bunch of guesses about how the data is structured. And those guesses are used to actually build a base level data model. So Looker sort of guesses at the shape of your data and builds the model such that you can start exploring your data and even building dashboards instantly. And then what generally happens is that the analysts who really understand the structure of the data will come in and start to elaborate on that model. So they'll say, okay, we have cost in the database and we have revenue, sale price in the database. We want to make a profit field. So let's define profit as revenue minus cost. And now we want to do a profit net shipping. So we want to do we'll take that profit thing that we just defined and we'll net out shipping. And now we have that field as well. And so those analysts will start to elaborate on the model and build something that's more and more useful to the business users. But really, right out of the box, as soon as it connects to the database, you can start exploring with Looker. And this is actually something that we track very closely, and we watch customer reviews very closely. And we're quite proud to consistently be at the very tippy top of the sort of customer-driven review sites like G2 Crowd in terms of implementation time. Compared to every other BI tool on the market. So something we focus a lot on and are very proud of how quickly people can get to value.
Thank you. And our last question reads, is Looker cloud or premise-based?
Yep. So the vast majority of our customers are in the cloud. That could be in Looker's cloud, where we'll host for you either in AWS or GCP cloud, with Azure coming online sometime early next year. That's as I said, the vast majority of our customers. We're very good at hosting Looker. We do it more than anybody else. So they have us do that because they know that we can make that really easy for them. But we also have lots of customers who host in their own virtual private cloud. Or even their own cloud. It's a pretty simple application to install. It takes about 5 minutes to get up and running on a server. So we have some customers who choose to host their own in their own cloud. And then we do have customers who host it on premise as well, and that's totally fine. We even have customers who host it fully inside a firewall where there's no access to the outside internet, and that works just fine. So we're pretty flexible there. We want to find the thing that works best for your particular situation and help you understand what the sort of the trade-offs there are, and and the cost for Looker is exactly the same no matter how it's hosted. So
thank you, Daniel. That was our last question. I'll now turn it back to you for any closing remarks.
Yeah, thanks so much. Let me put my screen back up so folks can see it. Hopefully that worked. Yeah, so I'll just say, thank you all for attending. I really appreciate it. If you want more information about Looker, please check us out at looker.com. You can see upcoming events in your area. You can request a personal demo or email us at hello@looker.com, and we'd love to talk to you about your specific use case and figure out how we can help you get more value from your data.
Thanks again, Daniel. On behalf of HR Morning, I would also like to thank everyone for attending the webinar. This concludes our program.